Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to completely deconstruct the masterful and honestly kind of mind-blowing psychological and technical methods of a true cinematic giant during his early Hollywood years. We're talking, of course, about the master of suspense himself. We're going to dive right into how he engineered attention, manipulated our deepest fears, and fought tooth and nail for his creative vision against the massive studio system. Okay, let's jump straight into our syllabus for today. We'll be looking at his Hollywood transition, mastering the MacGuffin, managing actors on set, breaking down some insane visual tricks, and finally uncovering his lost endings. All right, Section 1, the Hollywood transition and the psychology of isolation. So when he made the leap to American cinema, his first big project was the film Rebecca. Now, even though it featured an entirely English cast and a deeply British story, the American production environment really profoundly influenced its psychological stylization. To put that into perspective, think about a typical, realistic British country house from that era. It's usually connected to country lanes, right? It's grounded in actual geography. But Manderley, the estate in the film, it is rendered completely isolated. There are literally no nearby towns shown, making it feel physically impossible to escape. And by stripping away that geographic reality, he massively amplified the heroine's sheer terror because she had absolutely no one to turn to. In fact, the environment was so absolutely crucial here, he actually noted that the house was one of the 3 key characters of the picture. It operates just like a dark childhood fairy tale. Think Brothers Grimm, right? Fear takes center stage, effectively casting our nameless heroine as a trapped Cinderella and the very intimidating housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, as the ultimate wicked, ugly sister. And the psychological framing of that wicked sister, Mrs. Danvers, is just brilliant. Notice how she's kept perfectly, terrifyingly still throughout the film. Instead of showing her just casually walking around, which would, humanize her, she's barely ever shown in motion. The heroine hears a sound, turns around, and boom, Mrs. Danvers is just standing there. It's a technique that projects pure paranoia entirely from the heroine's point of view. Which brings us to Section 2, Mastering the MacGuffin, or The Art of Nothing. This is a totally foundational tool in his narrative toolkit, but man, does it confuse writers and audiences who try to overanalyze it. So what actually is it? Well, by definition, a MacGuffin is an apparatus, a gimmick, or a secret that drives the entire plot. The catch? It has to seem vitally important to the characters, but it is completely irrelevant to the audience. The whole term actually comes from this old kind of ridiculous joke about an apparatus for trapping lions in the Scottish Highlands. Since there are no lions in the Scottish Highlands, the apparatus is nothing, proving that a MacGuffin is, quite literally, nothing at all. And this shows us something fascinating. The most gripping, edge-of-your-seat suspense actually relies on pretexts that are wonderfully trivial. Empty, even. I mean, in Foreign Correspondent, characters are risking everything for a secret treaty clause. In the 39 Steps, it's literally just a mechanical airplane formula. In North by Northwest, it's vaguely defined as government secrets sold by some importer. We, the audience, don't actually care about the logistics of these secrets at all. We just care about the characters surviving the chase. All right, Section 3, the cattle on set. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about how he actually managed the talent. Because, well, it wasn't always smooth sailing behind the camera. There was definitely some dark humor and friction on set, especially during his only American comedy, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Okay, you've probably heard this absolutely infamous quote, "All actors are cattle." It sounds harsh, right? But let's look at the context. This wasn't just random cruelty. It was born from his immense frustration back in the early days of talkies in England with stage actors. They would constantly rush off the film sets to get to their theater matinees, literally eating sandwiches in cabs instead of dedicating their full focus to the film. And to a highly visual, meticulous director, that lack of dedication was just infuriating. But, the actors didn't always just sit there and take it. I absolutely have to share this spectacular retaliation from Carole Lombard. So on the very first day of shooting Mr. and Mrs. Smith, she actually had a 3-section corral built right there on the set. She brought in 3 live young cows, tied white discs with ribbons around their necks, and labeled them with the names of the cast: Carole Lombard, Robert Montgomery, and Jean Raymond. It was just a perfect practical joke, flawlessly kidding the master director on day 1. Moving right along to Section 4, Visual Tricks and Illusions. This is where we really see him engineering suspense, building some of the most seamless illusions in early cinema. Just think about the continuous plane crash in Foreign Correspondent. It was this incredible one-shot illusion that was so smooth, even seasoned technicians couldn't figure out how he pulled it off. Here's how it worked. First, the camera was placed inside the cabin looking over the pilot's shoulders. Next, a paper transparency screen in front of them showed the ocean rushing closer. Then, at the exact right moment, a massive water tank behind the screen burst through, instantly tearing the paper away and flooding the cabin. All in one terrifying, unbroken shot. No cuts. Just brilliant.
And the mechanical genius didn't stop at the impact. To show the plane actually sinking, he used a breakaway airplane wing that was attached to a hidden underwater railway track at the bottom of a massive studio tank. As the scene progressed, a branch track literally pulled the wing away from the fuselage, carrying the actors with it and creating this terrifyingly realistic sinking effect.
But sometimes the most profound suspense requires the absolute simplest trick. Take the movie Suspicion. The story needs the audience to be completely fixated on a glass of milk Cary Grant is carrying upstairs. Milk his wife is terrified is poisoned. The brilliantly simple solution? He put exactly one physical light bulb directly inside the glass of milk. It made the milk literally glow from within, totally dominating your attention as he carried it through the dark, shadowy set. Simply genius.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, the lost endings and the battle for the vision. Here we see the intense friction between a director's pure cinematic instincts and the rigid commercial rules of Hollywood studios.
So Suspicion was originally based on a novel called Before the Fact. It's a really dark psychological thriller where a wife suspects her charming spendthrift husband is actually a literal murderer. But here's the rub. The studio had cast the ultimate charming leading man, Cary Grant. And for the studio executives, having Cary Grant play an actual killer, that created an immediate, massive problem.
This created a massive clash. On one side, you have the forced Hollywood ending, this sudden kind of convenient misunderstanding where it turns out the husband is totally innocent. But the master's original unshot vision, way darker. The wife, accepting her fate to protect society, willingly drinks the fatal milk, but only after asking her husband to mail a letter to her mother. The film would have ended with a shot of him cheerfully mailing that very letter, the one that incriminates him. The studio hated this implication so much, they even mandated chopping the film down to 55 minutes at one point just to hide any hints of him being a killer, before finally restoring it with that forced happy ending.
So, this leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. Did Hollywood's unwritten laws and rigid taboos accidentally purify the psychology of these thrillers? Like, did they force them to become these complex stories about internal paranoia rather than just straightforward murder plots? Or did they fatally compromise his darkest, most brilliant cinematic visions? It's really something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope diving into the mechanics of suspense like this makes you want to go back and watch all these classics with a totally fresh set of eyes.